Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, first we'll say that we are crossing our fingers and our toes for the Garbers because they are in Southern California where the wildfires roam at the time of recording, which is why they couldn't be here. In addition to making their go bags ready, they're intermittently turning off power so they don't have any sparks coming from power lines. It's hearts go out to all those people affected. I know you're going to be listening to this in February, so hopefully the wildfires will have been put out by then. But, that's why they aren't here, because they were looking forward to this interview. Nick liked the covers, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, we're going to let our guest, Miss Sarah Kirk Pierzchala. Did I get anywhere close to the realm of right?
Pierzchala.
Pierzchala. Okay.
Yeah, that's getting there. Yeah, that's better.
I would like to say that this is because of the head injury and being hard of hearing that I can't pronounce names. But if we're being entirely honest, I sucked at that before. There was a reason I did not excel at foreign languages.
Well, this is Polish, and my husband always says, well, it's just pronounced the way it's spelled. Well, in Poland, it's got a little thing on that L, and it's not pronounced L, it's pronounced W. So I went from Williams to Pierzchala.
Yeah, it was very brave to use your actual given name for your author name, because I imagine spelling is going to be a barrier to entry for some people trying to find you.
But it does stand out.
It does. Well, the good news is, obviously you write as S. Kirk, but you said you're not hiding the fact that your first name is Sarah. So if you type in Sarah Kirk, your books pop up. So that is going for you. You don't have to get the last name right to find the books. Because I know some people who use pen names just because their last names are so hard to spell that they're like, no one's ever going to find me if I don't come up with something else. So, all right. So the next, can you introduce yourself to us, though, for people who might not know who you are?
Oh, sure. Well, I am basically a stay-at-home homeschooling mom. So my life is actually not particularly spectacular. So I've always enjoyed reading fantasy, mysteries, some science fiction. I love the science fiction. I grew up in the 80s, so there's a lot of really good stuff that helped kind of form my writing in addition to what I was reading. So my very first story was published when I was like 18 in the community college arts and letters publication. And that was like, oh, cool. That's a sign I'm on the right track. I fiddled around with the novel for a while. Nothing much came of it. Got married and had kids. So when I was focusing on homeschooling, it was a bit chaotic. I did have a notebook that I was always writing stuff down in. And I did have a prototype novel and a sequel that a bunch of friends had beta read. And I got a lot of good feedback, but I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth to homeschool and seriously write. So it really wasn't until 2019 that I dug stuff back out. Was consulting with some friends who also had projects we were interested in. Hey, we're at a time in our lives where we can start writing. So by then I had more life experience as far as reading more and observing more and just being more mature. So I think that even though I kind of got back into it late on the self-publishing scene, it was better for the actual product. My product was better in that I was bringing more life experience to it.
So given that you're homeschooling your kids and they're around when you're doing this, do you have them infected with the writing bug as well, or were they writing with you?
Well, not so much. My youngest was rumored to have been working on a secret manuscript, but as a very secretive teen, I don't know. It may have been a graphic novel. It may have been something else. I don't know. She won't show it to me.
Sure.
they see me reading a lot and they see me writing a lot. So it's carried over into their old their schoolwork. And that, when they move on to college, they're told that their writing is very good. So there's that, but I don't know. My eldest is interested in game design, so he's very interested in telling a story that way. My second was really interested in animation, a different way of telling stories, but she's going to go into biology instead. So I don't know how many of them will actually follow in, mom's footsteps, but I think bits of it rub off on them here and there.
I mean, so the science degree, plenty of people that write the hard sci-fi stuff come from a science background. So I don't think it's entirely out of the picture for somebody.
Oh, of course. That would actually be very helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely, I did Betty Crocker biology, the intro for non-science majors, and that sucked as an undergrad. I can't imagine doing more than that. So
well, she's currently in some heavy math classes and chemistry. I haven't even gotten to the fun animal part, but she's doing really well.
Yeah, I mean, hey, more power to them. I had the misfortune, though, of meeting the college president when I was as an undergrad, because I fell asleep in because the initial like 101 classes or whatever, like huge auditoriums full of people, and he was just doing his rounds, going around and visiting, and he decided to sit next to me. So he did instruct me in the finer art of falling asleep in class. If you're going to, you can't snore, and you certainly can't drool. So I learned valuable life lessons that day.
The worst for me was when I would have an art history class after lunch in a darkened auditorium to look at slides. Warm, dark, quiet, soft-spoken teacher. Oh, it was so hard to stay awake. And I loved the subject, but it was just like, it was like they were pumping drugs into the room to just make you fall asleep.
Yeah, there were a couple of classes where I spent the entire year standing in the class so I wouldn't fall asleep. I was a history major. It was a history class. I loved the subject matter, but the teacher was just so boring.
Oh, I've had a couple of those.
Yeah, so it was just like, so I entertained myself by doing all the reading on my own, but that teacher, I was definitely standing up in the back of the classroom, like bouncing on my heels so I didn't fall asleep. I feel you. And it's worse if you're going to college in the South because you get the humidity angle. So if the circulation isn't great in some of the old buildings that the school's in, it was miserable. I imagine it's a different kind of misery for those in the Northeast, because then it's just cold. I don't know which is worse. I imagine both suck differently. So did you end up majoring in creative writing then?
No, actually, I majored in drawing.
Okay.
Yeah, Portland State art department actually offered a degree in actually just drawing. I took a lot of literature. I could have, minored in if I wanted to, but I'm really glad I didn't major in literature, because my experience with the art degree was that by the time I graduated, I hated drawing so much. I never wanted to pick up a pencil or look at a human body ever again. And it took me a long time to get over that. So I can only imagine what would have happened if I had been forced to dissect all of my favorite books through some sort of weird feminist communist lens. I think it would probably have killed love of reading and writing.
Yeah, I could see that. That was one of the things that I always promised myself when I was in college and grad school. When I was done with school, I was going to read stuff just because I wanted to read it. Because, unfortunately, I love to read, but English departments can make you hate the reading by the selections. And it's just like, some of it's so pretentious, and I get it. It's a classic, but it was just, some of that stuff is so overhyped. And there were other classics that were actually enjoyable reads they could have picked. But it's like some of those classes, those books that you have to pick this one. And I'm like, if you want classics, Beowulf is good. Homer is good. The Iliad is good. Like, there are good classics out there, but are those the ones they picked? No.
We didn't study, because I was taking a lot of English and Victorian era literature, so we wouldn't have gotten that. But we did I know we did, the earliest thing we ever studied in one of my classes was Chaucer.
Yeah, I read that in the original Middle English. It was
Yeah.
a slog. I've read it in the translated. It's not that bad, and I enjoyed it. But reading it in the original Middle English was painful.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fun for the first few sentences, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute.
And you're trying to pronounce things, which is, we just recorded a time travel panel yet, and I don't know if that'll air before this episode or after, but that was one of the things.
Time travel, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things they came up with language is you can only go so far back, and it's roughly like 1500 before, as an modern English speaker, you wouldn't be able to understand them. And so if you've ever listened to Shakespeare in the Round in the original Middle English, you realize some of the jokes that were there that didn't quite land. It's because in the original version it rhymed, and it made sense for pacing purposes.
I don't know if we'll discuss a book by Connie Willis called The Doomsday Book.
Okay.
It's about time travel, and going back. This college student in this science program goes back in time to when one of the plagues is hitting in England outside Oxford, and she has to communicate with the natives, and I think the author does a really good job of showing the differences in how the language had changed, but how she had to adapt. She had like an implant that was helping her, and she had studied ahead of time, but she still had to like pretend that she knew what they were saying, that it made sense. And so then she actually had some passages of the English from that era in the book, and it was really fascinating. It's a really good book.
I'll have to check it out. I know the quintessential one that everyone thinks about with time travel is the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. I'm not sure. But the Standing Stones as a time travel plot device, I thought was kind of cool. And I really
go to Scotland in that one.
Yeah, so it's set after it starts after World War II. She was a nurse, and her husband was an intelligence officer, so she actually deployed to the field, and he did not. He stayed in England. So there's some tension in the beginning because he kind of feels somewhat emasculated because she actually saw action and he didn't. And then, they go for a second honeymoon now that the war is over, to Scotland, because, they're both, I think, from London, if I remember correctly. It's been a few years. And she ends up going on her own because reasons I don't remember, and she goes to the Standing Stones to walk around them, and somehow she gets sucked in, and she ends up in Jacobite Scotland during the Second Jacobite Rebellion. So where they try to put the Bonnie Prince on the throne,
right?
And it was definitely interesting. It had some interesting philosophical discussions, like about the nature of marriage and of promises, because she was like, well, they forced her to get married in the back in time. So is she committing adultery because she had a husband back home, but he hasn't been born yet? So do you follow the
I can imagine
linearly or from her perspective? And it was a fun discussion her character had with a monk in the book, which I really, really liked. It was a good series. I remember the first time I went, because my mom had like the first 4, and I went to the bookstore to get the 5th novel to get it. And it was in the romance section. I'm like, they tricked me. This is a romance novel? Because I'm like, it's got guns, it's got history, it's got time travel. Like, I was sold. And then I found out it was technically a romance novel, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's kind of why I avoided it. But you're really selling it. It really sounds like there's a lot more to it than just the romance.
It is, and she was a nurse, so she grapples with, and there are other time travels with her that get burned at the stake as witches because they saw the smallpox vaccine scar. And then because they had medical training, science was seen as witchcraft instead. And I'm just like, I mean, that's why a lot of people die. But anyway, it was definitely a lot of, kind of looks at the culture of the time, and I was there for it. So yeah, it's worth checking out. I dig it. I enjoyed it. So, but yeah, so when we were talking about that, the language, it sort of amused me. I had as much trouble reading All Quiet on the Western Front in German because I took it as a German and literature class as an undergrad, because my required language, I did German. And we had to read Am Western nach mich. I'm probably butchering. It's been years since I've spoken German, but we had to read it in the original English or in the original German, and we couldn't use the English translation as a side by side, which meant we spent a lot of time with our dictionary. It was an interesting experience. I will say that makes me a lot more sympathetic to the authors that you'll meet who English is not their first language.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine writing in a different language. Like it was Conrad, who was actually Polish, right? But he wrote understood and wrote English so well, people didn't know that it wasn't his first language. But
and I've read some, I've read some Sri Lankan authors who write in English because, like, a large majority of the reading market, if you want to make a lot of money at it, and somebody can figure out how to make money at it, I'd like to know too. But a large part of that market is English speaking and English reading. So
I noticed that.
So if you want to sell, if you want to be, visibility, then you kind of need to be in English. Now there is debate whether you do it in the British English or the American English because we spell things differently and we have different turn of phrase. It used to be everyone wrote it in the American style, but I think people are kind of used to the British style now too. So nobody bats an eye one way or the other.
Yeah, as long as it's consistent. Now, when I restarted my writing endeavor, I realized I had read so much British fiction that I didn't realize I was spelling some words just the British way, not the English. So I had to go back and make some corrections. And now I'm I've got Grammarly on my computer, so it lets me know if I'm spelling it correctly or incorrectly, depending on the continent.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you don't think about, but it's language is so fun when you start playing with it in literature that, I can appreciate those that are doing that through the barrel or through the prism of not speaking it natively originally, because there are plenty of native English speakers that still struggle, and I can't imagine doing that in my non-native tongue. So hats off to all those fellas. But all right, This would not be the Blasters and Blades podcast if we didn't do the religion question. We went off beat with all the literature questions, and it's fun, but we'll get started. So first, we generally will tell you, dear listener, how we found her, our guest, and we found her through the Three Ravens Discord, and some of the other authors we've had on recommended you. So we were kind of like, let's do this. So for the religion question, are you ready? Because there are wrong answers.
Okay.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
I'm a fallen away Star Wars aficionado. So I grew up in the Star Wars cult, but now I'm kind of agnostic, and I don't I haven't filled that vacuum with anything else yet.
Okay. So because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Oh, Narnia all the way.
Okay. Did you grow up on the classic fantasy stuff then, or did you branch out to some of the?
I did. I grew up on Tolkien and Lewis. In fact, I think because my mother was a convert, an adult convert to Catholicism. And about the time that she was getting really excited about that and looking for things to read, Tolkien was exploding, and she was really interested in him as a person and in his friendship with C.S. Lewis. So our house was full of their books, and they were like family members to me. So definitely those two. And then we also collected some of their influences, like George MacDonald and others, and some of the other Inklings. I also like Charles Williams. I know Tolkien didn't like Charles Williams' work, but I liked his novels a lot. He's very strange. Have you read anything by Charles Williams?
I have not.
He's very strange. They're very theological and very quirky, and most of them take place like in modern day England. And they will involve one character being taken over by a succubus, and him giving his life over to this thing, and it ruins his life. Another one, people will be dead and they don't know it, and they're in purgatory and they have to work their way through it. I think they're very interesting. I like them quite a bit. So those are the kinds of things I like.
Did you ever get into the more pulpy side of things, like the Piers Anthony and some of the others?
No, not really. I'm discovering Gene Wolfe. I love Gene Wolfe. And I'm just now reading William Gibson's Neuromancer, which I should have read quite a while ago, but it's funny reading it. It's like, wow, his take on cyberpunk is so pervasive in the culture now that it's like, well, I almost feel like I have read it just with all of the other things that I've seen around. But it's well worth reading on its own. It's very well written.
Okay. I have not checked those out, but I'll definitely have to now. My TBR list keeps growing, and I only have so many. Unfortunately. All right. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is people stop asking the very truly most important questions. So we're bringing this back thanks to one of our sponsors. So what is your favorite dinosaur?
Well, probably T-Rex. He's just so big and so impressive. And I remember they had at our local science museum, they brought Sue, S-U-E, one of the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons that had been unearthed in Montana, I think, fully put together on display, huge dinosaur exhibit. And I took my kids and it was really fun. And I've never forgotten that. And so there's a soft spot in my heart for T-Rex. And of course, I love Jurassic Park. So,
yeah, Jurassic Park is good. The movies left so much room on the plot that they could have gone to from the books, though. The books were phenomenal.
Well, I'll have to say, I know I'm usually one of those who will say the book's always better, but I'll have to say I did admire the way Spielberg, I liked his screenplay a lot. He did make a really good movie out of a really good book, and they didn't necessarily have to have everything that was in the book, and pages and pages of telling you how Linux works and how she was getting into those files and stuff was just perfect how they did it on the screen. Just get in there and do it.
No, I just meant
like Jeff Goldblum, so
I didn't have a problem with that. More the sightings on the land, because some of the stuff got free from the island.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It
opened with that, didn't it? Didn't it have like a prologue?
It did as a prologue. As a little kid out in one of the little compies was nibbling at the baby. And then you hear when they're getting treated by the doctor, when the parents take the kid to the doctor, the local doctor's talking about other people that have disappeared or showed up eaten. And, of course, they're thinking it's modern animals like bears and wolves and whatnot. But
I think if they had kept that in the movie, it would have really spoiled that. They had it with that beautiful sense of excitement and wonder and everything as they were going to the island. If you'd already seen what was happening, the twist of everything going wrong wouldn't have been quite so dramatic, I think.
Yeah, and that music that lead into when they saw the dinosaurs for the first time.
Yeah.
Classic. I really dig it. I also liked the Jurassic World. I know they get they're not as popular with some people, but I enjoyed it.
I think had some good bits. I did like Pete Postlethwaite. I thought his character was really cool.
Did you ever watch Camp Cretaceous?
Mm-mm.
So in Jurassic World, when everyone's fleeing and they're evacuating the island, because apparently every step along the way, like, we're going to do it right this time, and obviously it never works. But when they were fleeing into Camp Cretaceous, that's the name of obviously the camp. They were going to do a youth camp on the Jurassic World location, and they brought a bunch of, some people won contests and some were influencers, and they were all going to go on, for this tour to be the inaugural campers, and they get forgotten when the evacuation happens. And it's about these, preteens, I guess, surviving in the dinosaur infested whatever. So it's Lord of the Flies meets dinosaurs.
Oh, okay. Well, that has potential.
It was actually surprisingly good. I watched it for the kids, but I'm like, it's still kind of cool. I'm not normally into cartoons, but I made an exception for that one. And I don't think that's in any of the books. I think that was wholly created from from the movie world. But it gave us the most iconic line of any movie is, you spent so much time thinking about whether you could do something, you didn't consider whether you should.
I know. I think about that a lot.
Yeah, especially when you watch Modern Science and you're like, this is how we get Skynet. Because I'm watching some of the robotic stuff happening, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, do you want Skynet? Because this is how you get Terminator.
Yeah, we got a Roomba for Christmas, and I really like it, but I just think that the people are going to go overboard with the robots and the having them plugged into your life, into your privacy. Where's the privacy going to go? And then they're going to break down, and then you're going to be stuck with this thing that doesn't work, and then it's just one more thing to deal with.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like I grew up in the 80s, and everyone was worried about people spying on you, loose lips sink ships, and all that. So the idea of inviting the spies,
even turn off.
Yeah, inviting them into the spy on your house with like Alexa or Siri or the smartphone.
Yeah, and then you see on Twitter, there's this whole genre of people's indoor security cams, like, oh, my cat did this, or my kid crawled out of his crib at night or whatever, and it's like, wait, who's got cameras in all of the rooms of their house, and then they're willingly putting it all on the internet just because something funny happened?
Yeah,
that's just it's not healthy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I like my privacy. There's a reason I only put so much of my life out, even as an author. I think there's something to be said for having a life that you don't, like just live life instead of going out and like trying to experience it through a camera. And I've had that conversation with my kid the other day. He's like, oh, I like your army stories, and you've got all these cool stories. I'm like, that's because we put the TV down, we put the phones down, and we went out and just lived. Like, you just enjoy the moment. That's how you build those memories. And it's because everybody has those if they grew up at the right time. Nowadays it's like, well, this one time I played this video game. I'm like, it just doesn't age as well. So I've been encouraging them to get away from those electronics.
Good.
So all right. So T-Rex is a popular answer though, so I am not at all surprised. And then finally, because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Oh, coffee all the way. First cup of the day is usually just some sweetener, no cream.
Okay.
And then for afternoon coffee break, I will have cream with it. And we always brew our own from beans. I'll have instant, absolute emergency, but we gotta brew it fresh.
So I do the K-Cups just because I'm the only one that drinks it. So, I mean, I don't want to waste it. And I try to limit, because I like mine with cream and with coffee creamer that has sugar in it and flavors. And so, like, basically to get it the way I like it, I make the coffee double strong, but then I'm basically drinking, and calorically, I'm drinking a Big Mac. So, like, I can't let myself have as many, which means I don't go through as much of it. So for me, the K-Cups make sense.
Yeah, that's nice little portion control there. I used to have one of those machines. It was the Starbucks version of it, but they were so expensive. I ended up getting rid of it. But yeah, the reason I have it black in the morning is because I'm usually trying to do intermittent fasting, so I'll have my calories later in the day. And I know that if myself well enough that if I start out putting a bunch of cream in my coffee first thing in the morning, I'll have another cup with a cream and sweetener, and then another. But if I just have it as coffee and not as a meal, I can save the cream for later in my window of eating. So
for the intermittent fasting, are you doing the OMAD, the one meal a day, or just, only eating within a window?
Within a window.
Yeah. That's something I used to do. I need to get back to it because I fell off the healthy eating wagon back in, I guess, right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, me too.
And I restarted the last Monday in December, which I think was the 30th or the 31st. And I've been going strong for these 10 days.
That's good.
You got to get back into it because, You can't eat as much as you used to when you get older. Like
Yeah, that's for sure.
I used to eat whatever I wanted, and I was so active that it just didn't matter. And now I'm like, when did this happen? So when you do the coffee creamer, do you do like flavored creamers or just straight dairy creamer with no additives?
It's full cream, but the flavoring, the sweeteners are the Torani or Da Vinci brand flavored syrups of the sugar-free variety.
I've done that. The hazelnut and the vanilla to get French vanilla.
There's a huge variety of flavors. My husband's always bringing home, hey, try this one, coffee, this or Kahlua or chocolate chip cookie dough or whatever. I was like, okay, put it in the coffee.
We paid for my grad school as a barista, so I've tried so many at this point. I'm like, you know what? I know what I like. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
vanilla is always a good choice.
and the French vanilla has that little bit of that nutty undertone that just works for me. But because I like so much cream and sugar, I also drink my coffee double strength. So I my stepdad was visiting, and I made the coffee like I was going to drink it because I would be diluting it, and he drank it straight. And he's like, did you just like pour caffeine in this? What's going on here? This is not normal coffee. I'm like, well, Dad. But he should have been used to it because he was a Navy man. They drink their coffee so thick it'll hold a spoon up for you. You can't tell the difference between the coffee and the bilge sludge. So, the only thing I can't do when it comes to coffee is I won't do decaf because that's actually bad for you. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, people. What's that?
Pointless.
Well, it is because it actually has coffee in it or caffeine in it. So you're not actually, what they do is they bleach the beans to get a lot of the caffeine out, but they don't get all of it. But then they add additives back to re-dye it so it looks like coffee beans again. And I try to, if my general rule of thumb is the less additives, the better. And if I can't pronounce it, I probably shouldn't eat it when it comes to food. And so I've looked at what some of the additives they use to re-dye the beans, and I'm like, nope, I'll just drink regular coffee.
That is so weird.
It is. Yeah, exactly. And then I won't do instant because every time I do that, I get flashbacks. We used to take the Folgers instant coffee that came in the MREs and we'd put it under our gums, like dip, to get the caffeine when it would liquefy, and then it would go straight into your bloodstream through your gums. Which is, it did its job in the day, but I look at that and I'm just like, I can't bring myself to drink it now.
I don't know that I'm going to ever drink it either after hearing that.
Some people say they can't taste the difference. I know people that swear by the instant stuff to the day they died. My grandparents were like, just they did the instant in the little glass Folgers jar with, the little crystal looking. But hey, no hate on them. They'll drink what they're going to drink, right? So you reach a certain age. You reach a certain age, and you earn the right just by not dying to have your own weird opinions.
Yeah, that's how I feel about my dad. The family members will, he's doing this or he's doing that, and I'm like, he's 80.
Yeah, so
it makes him happy.
when you were drinking, because we're recording this right before this will be airing right before Valentine's Day, but we recorded it just after the New Year. So do you have a favorite holiday version of your coffee, or do you just drink the same thing year round?
Actually, for the holiday, we had some like powdered cappuccino mix.
Okay.
That husband picked up at. Do you have a U.S. Chef's where you are? Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay, so it's like a restaurant supply house that sells to the public. You don't have to be a member of anything, so you can get like industrial sized quantities of things should you want. So he came home with this canister of like cappuccino mix, and that was really nice with a little bit of extra chocolate and some of the Torani sugar-free peppermint syrup, and then whipped cream on top. So that was my holiday drink.
Cool. So all righty. Well, with that out of the way, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we're going to jump back and we're going to talk about the books that brought us here. So with that.
Van, I know this is hard for you to accept or even believe. But you're not imagining this. You're not going crazy. Your grandfather believed right down to the core of his being in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.
You expect me to believe that my grandfather was a star-faring soldier?
I can prove it to you.
And how are you going to do that?
By taking you for a flight. Whenever you're ready, Van.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And I will have to say, Podium really knocked it out of the park with that commercial, but that is not what most people give me.
I was just sitting there going, wow, this is some great production values.
Yeah, I guess because the author moved so many copies, they decided it was worth it. But I will happily share that, really, because I really need to check that series out. At this point, I think they're on like book 16, so it's like a huge commitment to get into that series. But it is on my I want to read this list. So that might be my Christmas present to myself in 2025, is just buy all 1 bazillion books in the series. So with that, thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude, dear listener. So let's talk about the books that brought us here, Beyond Cascadia, which is the name of the series. Where did you get the premise for this universe? Like, how did the idea that became this series, how did that happen?
Well, I like to say that it's kind of a combination of Blade Runner and the Brothers Karamazov, because it has that sort of dystopian cyberpunk setting, but it has also the human element, and then a lot of family drama.
Okay, so when you say family drama, are you talking like saga style stories where it follows one family member?
My vision for the whole series, which I hope to wrap up in 7 volumes, and not hope, I'm going to wrap up in 7 volumes, will span about 25 years, about a quarter of a century in the lives of these characters. So they witness or are involved in various geopolitical issues, turmoils, and as well as family secrets and shenanigans and things to do with corporations, global corporations, and then the settlement of Mars plays into it also.
Okay, so how strict are you with the actual science? So would you consider this hard sci-fi, or is this more hand-wavium?
It really depends on what needs to happen. I do find myself doing a lot of research on things and going down rabbit holes, and then just going, I'm not going to put all this in there because nobody's going to want to know. I caught myself a few times, where I was going to assert something that I would research, or somebody would tell me, it's like, oh, that wouldn't work like that. It's like, okay, definitely not going to have that. If I know that it's not going to work, I certainly won't put it in. Right now I'm keeping track of developments in related to quantum entanglement and consciousness, but I don't know how much I'm actually going to put in, because I need the mechanism, the science in the story needs to be able to do some things, and sometimes the less you explain, the better. So it depends.
Yeah, I get that, and sometimes It's like the iceberg theory where the reader's only seeing the top part, but you've got to have the stuff underneath it to support it to make it make sense.
Yeah.
And you have to know even if you don't tell the reader because it makes everything else work.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, definitely an iceberg. There's a lot of research going on, but very little of it actually makes it into the scenes.
Okay. So when you do your research, like, do you get really granular with it, or do you just do like read the white papers, or do you read the whole research report?
Oh,
And if you're listening,
probably the white papers. Like for book 5 here, I needed to know a little bit about the portable nuclear reactors that they talk about for. Oh, these will be on Mars, or the Army's developing these. So I needed to know how big they were and how much power they would generate and how they're transported and that. I didn't go into the details on how they actually work, but
that makes sense.
There was enough detail that it was believable and made sense in the story, and it's based on a real thing.
That makes sense. So I'm going to show you, this is obviously going to be the thumbnail, so if you're seeing this, but this is the Beyond Cascadia that you'll get from the Amazon series page. But this is your first book. So how did you book cover, excuse me, how did you come up with the art for the cover? So one of the things, like we talked about in the pre-show, is they tell you, you're on the creative side, like your book cover should be different than all the others so it stands out, but also exactly the same, which is not the most helpful advice for someone who is steeped in the arts. I know a lot of the trad pub tends to be very artsy fartsy design aesthetics that like weird symbols or whatever. And I get they tie into the book, but it's just very minimalist sometimes. And then on the opposite side, you see a lot more almost paintings on indie side of things where it's like a scene from the book and they're both have room. Some of the trad pub covers I have enjoyed. You sort of split the difference. It definitely gives that artsy vibe, something you could see, take the title off. You could see it on a wall paintings for somebody, at a coffee shop, but it stands out and it's different enough that it doesn't feel pretentious. So how did you come up with the art for these books?
You want to know? Okay. Well, each one's slightly different. So in this first one, this is actually the second version. No, probably the third version I've had of this one. First one was a close-up of raindrops. And it was very nice, but it didn't quite convey the cyberpunk feel that I wanted. What you're looking at here is a minimum of 3 or 4 overlays, different images that I generated in Midjourney, and then put together in Canva. I think I used Canva, and then I had my son help me make the actual cover.
Now and I didn't check, for the print version, did you just go with a black background for the back, or did you make a wraparound image?
Oh, it's wraparound.
Cool.
The physical covers, they look great and they feel great. They're really nice.
All right, and so this is the second. Hold on, let me do this. What the heck is it doing to me? All right, I will get the second cover while you tell us about it.
Now, the second cover, the image on that, my son did. He hunted around for the different image. I knew what I wanted, so he hunted around for an image of Mount Hood and an image of the full moon that looks like a blood moon, and then the city sprawl. And he combined all those, and he played with all the resolution and the noise. And also, you can see there's like raindrops, again, water coming down there in the sky. He put all of those together. And on this one, it continues for the physical cover. It continues around across the spine, under the back, and you have the city also. So that was not AI at all. That was all stock footage put together in Affinity Photo, I believe is the program he used.
So the award this one has on it, the reader's favorite 5-star, where is that an actual award, or did you just put it on there?
Oh, yeah. So that on the digital cover for the ebook, they included, they said, "Oh, you got 5 stars. We loved it. Here's your little file, your little, I think it was a PNG that you can add to your covers." So I did. And then I had some real stickers that I could put on the physical ones. I think I ran out and I didn't get any more. But so that's what that is.
Okay.
It echoes the moon.
And then Literary Titan Book Award for the third one.
Yeah, and that one also won actually a more serious award. It was the Catholic Media Association Book Awards. They won a 3rd place in that one. And they don't give out stickers. I have a certificate framed though.
So is this a religious book, or is it just wholesome enough that religious awards liked it?
Now on this one, the 3rd one in the series, and it has followed some of the characters on a different path, kind of like a side quest, which involves going to a seminary and being ordained a priest, and then locking horns with an atheist and having some discussions about faith and belief in the reality of whether God exists or not. So, yes, it is a religious book.
Okay, nothing wrong with that. I just was clarifying. Then we got your 4th book, which is I've seen a lot of Constantina Wire, so that's an interesting choice. So,
did you want to know about the cover or the plot?
Yeah. No, more the cover, because we're going to talk about the overall plot and stuff. But right now, we're just going to look at the covers because they're cool.
Well, the previous one was also, my son had worked on that one for me. I had a bunch of stock photos that I wanted him to combine, and then we put some AI stuff over it. So it gave me I wanted to have a very Baroque kind of art-rich, stormy painting feel to it.
Okay.
So I think it succeeds.
Yeah. All right, and then the 4th book with the desert kind of dune vibe that it's giving.
Yes, that was an artist. Ryan Williamson?
I do not.
Okay, so he writes. It's the Doomsday Recon series from Wargate Books.
Okay.
He also designs covers. Well, he might be too busy now, but he did design that one. And he was really good with listening to what I wanted, because I had a fairly distinct feel that I wanted and these images, and I just kept saying, "No, this, could you do this?" And he was very patient, and that's what he came up with.
And that's hard when you're coming into a series that's got existing art, because you want to look like it fits in with the others. And I think these all do that. So
I'm glad to hear that.
All right, and finally, you've got book 5, Stare at the Sun. Okay.
Yes, and that one, again, it's all AI elements, assets that I generated, and then combined in 2 different programs. And the silhouette of the trees there continues around the back on the physical cover.
Okay. All right. So before we get any deeper on this series, we do like to ask this because we do have some families that listen to the podcast together. So what would you say the age range for this series is? Like, if it helps a lot of people to use like the movie rating system, just because that's something everyone's familiar with, but how would you rate this as far as age appropriateness for readers?
Well, probably PG-13, or maybe, I don't know, 16 and up. It's really hard to say because parents have such different standards on what they'll allow. I do know there's a bit more profanity in the first one. Because I did kind of tone it down in the rest of the series, because the main character gets married, and so he doesn't swear as much. He also stops smoking, and they have a kid. So there's less swearing, and that's kind of more confined to the bad guys. but it's usually just some profanity, not blasphemy, and anything else, any adult activities or violence. It's not at all graphic. There's nothing where you'd go, oh, and have to turn away or skip the pages. I'm pretty discreet.
Yeah, that's one thing you have to ask now, because I'm like, if you listen to a lot of audiobooks and you're driving around to doctor's appointments or kids' activities, and like, can I listen to this in the car with a kid? That is always a consideration. So, speaking of audiobooks, do you have at any point plans on making this an audiobook, or for now is it just staying print and ebook?
Well, actually, Google Play Books has offered AI versions, AI narrated, and I listened to their samples and I thought, well, might as well get them out there, because I'm not going to be able to afford to hire a real voice actor anytime soon or ever. I wish I could, because I know there's some out there that are, I hear them and it's like, oh man, they're just that's really good. I wish you were reading my story, but it's just not possible at this point. It didn't cost me anything to put them on Google, so they are there. And
Now,
I chose the voice and the speed, and it's like, well, that's actually not too bad. I listened to the first one completely on their AI narrator, and it was actually listenable.
ringing endorsement. So for that, with it being on Google Play, does that mean the story is wide?
Oh yeah, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play for the ebooks. Paperback and some hardback on Amazon, and some hardback on Barnes & Noble.
Okay. So let's talk about the book itself now that we're here. What would your elevator pitch be for this series?
But if you like Blade Runner, and if you like the Brothers Karamazov, you'll like this story. But it's not as heavy as the Brothers Karamazov. Certainly nowhere near as heavy as Dostoevsky. But it's just an engaging story of the near future, with relatable characters dealing with things that are coming down the road related to AI or genetic engineering or geopolitics.
So would you say this series is character driven or idea driven?
I would say it's character driven.
And I don't think either one of those is a bad thing. When I talk about idea driven, it's like, you've seen some where the story might be like, I've seen some books about cloning where the characters matter and you do get attached to them, but it's very clear when you're reading it, the larger issue in the novel is the, transhumanist question. When do we stop being human, and is that a good thing?
Yeah.
So, and those are fun
and
too.
I try to walk a line where to keep the big idea engaging, but to have the interesting people.
Okay. So what can you tell us about the characters? What can you tell us about the characters?
Well, I like my protagonists a lot. We have an American named Owen, he's more of sort of an IT guy who gets caught up in a much more serious situation where he's asked to investigate what could be a terror plot. And not only does he find out more about that, he then finds out that his boss has some kind of ulterior motives in having him giving him these assignments. He's like testing him. He finds out in the course of the first and a half book. But he also encounters this one character, Tomas, who is from Colombia, but he's also half Chinese, who comes from this very powerful family of scientists and corporate level. It's called like a chaebol, they call it in Korea. own lots of companies, have their fingers in all sorts of different industries, and they're up to no good. So his relationship with Tomas, who really doesn't know what's going on, but is sort of in this plot, is one of the main drivers in the first book.
Okay. What can you tell us about the bad guys in this series? Does it change from book to book? Is it an episodic series, or is it linear progression of a larger plot?
Well, it is a linear progression of a sort of a larger plot, but bad guys come in and out. So
Okay.
in the first book, the bad guy is Tomas's brother, Francisco. He gets neutralized, but lives to be involved in the next two books. And at the end of the second book, there's like two tracks. So you have Tomas's story going off through book 3, and you have Owen's story continuing through 4, 5, and 6. And at the end of book 2, a new villain is introduced who figures prominently in 4 and 5, who Owen has to deal with. And he's sort of an ideologue, aspiring tyrant who is helping overthrow, well, not overthrow, but secede, encourage the 3 West Coast states to secede from the United States. So that is the political turmoil in those two. And then in book 6, a villain who was introduced in book 1, but people probably would not remember until, boom, they're on the stage again, comes back to make some more trouble. And then in book 7, we have another of the family member of the powerful Chibal, who has also been introduced, but people wouldn't perhaps immediately spot this person as being a villain, will come forward and be the final. I wouldn't say it's not going to be a boss battle, but because that's what's going to be. There's going to be a lot of psychology and theology towards the end, in addition to geopolitics and not interstellar, solar system politics, because by then the Mars plot will come to the fore.
Okay. Would you say that you know where the next 2 books are going? Is this one you plotted out, or do you kind of feel it out as you go?
Oh, they're plotted out, and I'm already drafting. I'm almost 60,000 words into the draft of book 6. There's pretty wiggle rooms. Details will, of course, change, and sometimes you find things happening because the characters are just going to do stuff because they're going to do, and you had been thinking they were going to do one thing, but that didn't work out and something else comes up. But I'm pretty confident I'll get it to end where I want it to end. I'm not going to do a George R.R. Martin at all. I've actually have readers saying, "You're not going to do a George R.R. Martin, are you?" I'm like, "Nope, I promise. I have an end in sight. I'm going to finish it."
Okay. Is there potential? Is there potential for spinoffs in the universe, or do you think once you finish this 7th book, you're gonna go to a different world, start over again with the world building?
That's a really good question. Now each installment here is not exactly standalone, but they're not cliffhangers. I don't end on any cliffhangers. They're more or less resolved, but there's enough little things in the background. There's enough incidental characters that I could see, if there was a huge demand, having some spin-off adventures of standalone books. So it is possible, but I also do have some other projects completely unrelated that it would be kind of fun to get to those too. But we'll see.
It's on the indie side, in the small press side, you get a lot of people that will put all of their books in the same universe. Some people love it, and if you're hooked on the universe, why not? And then other authors are like, nope, I want to break. I want to go over here now and look at this nice shiny thing. So I think really it comes down to preference.
Yeah, and well, also time and organization. for when I want to break from working on this, I'd go and I'll either, sketch out some ideas for larger novels, but I do really like doing short stories too, because that kind of gets you, we're talking about kind of big idea versus character driven. Short stories are really nice for having your idea and your twist in there, and because people aren't expecting anything more, really. They're not expecting a huge amount of character development when it's just a sort of a Twilight Zone type twist. So that's fun. I like doing those.
Okay. Is there anything about the universe you think that makes yours stand out compared to all the other science fiction that's out there?
Well, it's kind of more realistic. It's like near future speculative. A lot of people say, I can't believe you called this when stuff happens. And I'll put stuff in that's real, and they'll go, oh, well, you made that up. And I'm like, no, that really happens in China. They really do that. So it's kind of more, I don't even know. It is science fiction, and it takes place a bit in the future, and the characters are interacting with stuff that doesn't quite exist yet, but it's almost more just like a psychological thriller. And people seem to like the balance I have between the characters being really believable and relatable, and being in situations that are like, oh my gosh, we hope this doesn't happen, but we can see it probably will.
Okay, that is a fair comparison. Obviously there's you said there's going to be 7 books. You think there's 5 out at the time of recording, yes. But you're on book 6. You think you're gonna be able to wrap it up at 7?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so what kind of tech and stuff can we look for? Obviously, each individual universe is going to have its own internally consistent rules of science or magic. What can we expect tech-wise from this series?
From this series, I'm kind of extrapolating what you see developing in things like the Elon Musk's Neuralink, or genetic engineering, and also things like you see the surrogacy issue with couples, or even single men saying, hey, I want a baby, I'm going to buy it from this third world woman. So there's some of that. So that's not even really tech. That's happening now. And I have some of that, but with the addition of, and you can get them genetically modified to be better looking or longer lived or healthier. So the kind of the gene editing.
The CRISPR gene editing, they've actually done that on humans already in China. Although the doctor did it without patient consent, so he kind of disappeared. We've already seen some cloning and some artificial wombs. They famously, I think Dolly the sheep was one. In all of the cases where they cloned and or used artificial wombs for, to science to see what's possible, the tech isn't there, so they didn't live very long.
No, it's not there yet, and I'm hoping that it never will be. But
yeah, but it's not implausible to think that it might not happen. I think, that's just we'll avoid that issue. I'll tell you my thoughts on that offline. So with that, so you've got the tech in there that's kind of near future. Are there aliens in this universe?
There's not aliens, but there is evidence of transcendent stuff. There will be, like, on the very far peripheries, intimation of demonic activity or an angelic intervention, but nothing at all like a Left Behind series.
Okay.
I don't know that I will bother addressing the alien issue unless maybe it's just like would come up in conversation, but no, they're not going to be encountering aliens. So I'm sorry to if anybody's expecting that, that's not going to happen.
Okay, that's fair. Was there anything about the Beyond Cascadia series that you think we didn't cover that you want potential readers to know?
Well, I don't if anybody's wondering where the name came from. In my universe, I've set it far enough into the future. I hope that it'll be after any kind of cataclysmic Cascadia earthquake, which we're always being told we're due for any moment. I'm hoping it's far enough into the future that it's after I'm dead, but that the West Coast was kind of separated, and so they became even a little bit more liberal and progressive. But also, there's been it kind of led to a global depression, and so the tech isn't quite as advanced as you would think it would be by then. So they're still kind of recovering from the depression. But that's where the name came from. We're always told that the Cascadia event was going to happen, and so this was after that, and so that kind of affected the culture.
Okay. Do you keep the existing political structures that we have now, or in this future world has things evolved past what we would know?
Oh no, it's pretty recognizable.
Okay. You can definitely tell the era when the stories are written based on who the bad guy is. Is it proto-Russia? Is it, the communist Chinese? Is it...
Yeah, it's kind of... And there's a lot of Muslims living in the United States that have affected the culture.
Right. I mean, but who the bad guy is, you can definitely tell. There are snapshots in time of when the story is written. And that's actually, there's not a problem with that, but you can definitely pick those trends up. Like, oh, okay, I recognize this. I know when this was written, even if you couldn't just check the back of the book. So, all right, this is the part of the interview, dear listener, dear viewer at home, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind. On the reviewing platforms, your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part. Hop on over. Leave a few stars. She likes the 5. That's her size. She's a size 5 star. And she wants you to share some thoughts and, convince the other readers on why it's awesome. And with that, how can listeners and viewers find you if they wanted to track you down?
You can sign up at my website as kirkpierzchala.com. And just get on a mailing list. If you follow me on my author's page at Amazon, you'll also be notified whenever I get anything out. You can follow me on my Substack. You can talk to me directly, message me directly on Substack. Yeah, and I will answer. And Goodreads also.
I'm stealing this idea shamelessly from Paulie Cooley, who's a horror writer I know, and I listen to his podcast. But one of the things he does is when he uses actual science articles that will research for various things, and he shares that to his Patreon and to his Substack, like, oh, this is the article I'm reading for, future story, not really explaining how it's going to be used, but he shares the articles that the research he's doing. Given that you're doing your own research, is that something you're sharing with your followers?
I drop hints on Twitter, on X sometimes when I run across something that's like, haha, I put it out there and wonder, it's like, well, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do with this, but, oh, this is going to figure in. I think the last one, it was incendiary drones. So I retweeted a photo or some videos, horrific videos of what could be done with that. And it's like, oh, these are going to figure in my, in this upcoming novel. So I do that, but it's usually on Twitter. I don't send that out from one of my other sites. Okay,
that's fair. All right, and you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTube, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. And finally, we have our Spotify website over there. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from out of Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitters, and the emails, which are all conveniently linked in our link tree. You can support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until it pours out of their eyeballs, and then we'll film it and make you watch. And with that, you can also buy some of that coffee brand coffee. Link is in the show notes. Use the code podcast grunts, and you get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. You support an American business. It's a win-win all around, people. And with that, I will say thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, we are out. Wait for it. You can't cuss